Well, thank you guys so much for having me, and I appreciate you guys allowing us to do some virtual presentations to you as well. I had planned on coming up there to see you guys in person, and I will do that soon enough. But appreciate in the meantime being able to do this. So I have two presentations I think I'm going to go over. So I'm going to try to go through them fairly quickly. But what I'll do is I'll probably I think there's some time set for questions. Maybe I'll do questions for each presentation separately just so we don't get them mixed up. So to start, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the non-point source funding that's available at IDEQ. Some of it you may be familiar with, others maybe not. So we're going to go over some of this non-point source funding. Mostly, we're going to look at the federal 319 non-point source program, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about Idaho State Agricultural Grant Program. I just want to walk you guys through the process of these and applying for these types of funds, and then we'll also go over a couple of details. Again, this is going to be fairly quick and sweet. So, any information that you guys want to seek afterwards, just please always feel free to contact me directly. So to start with the federal 319 program, you guys may be familiar with this one already. This comes out of the Clean Water Act. And this is an annual grant opportunity for non-point source pollution management. It's open to all U.S. territories, tribes, U.S. states, and a lot of times is implemented down by landowners, farmers, ranchers, cities, other state agencies. All sorts of people are implementing these grant funds, federal grant funds on the ground. DEQ is the state agency that implements this program. So we are the primary contact for this program. And in order to utilize this funding opportunity, the focus of your projects need to be on reducing pollutants and ultimately improving water quality in lakes, streams, rivers, and then sometimes even aquifers. So just to give you an example of what some of these funds are put towards, the 319 funds have a much larger reach. So they're going towards agriculture, urban stormwater, transportation, mining, forestry, groundwater protection, and also hydrologic habitat modification, including wetland reconstruction. So it can include a lot of different things, and a lot of it has to do with how you've envisioned these projects, and then how you tie those back to certain things on the landscape and in the water. So now I'm switch real quick over to the State Agricultural Best Management Practices Grant. This one may be a little bit less familiar. It comes out of Idaho Statute 393628A. There's a lot of different information in there if you want to look a little bit further into it. But this is an annually appropriated grant program through the state. And these funds are appropriated for agricultural BMPs specifically. So that's kind of what makes it different from the 319 funds. Again, DEQ is a state agency that implements these grants. And the focus for these needs to be reducing pollutants still. But in this case, it needs to be directed, as I mentioned, towards agriculturally based best management practices. And the different people that qualify for this is a little bit smaller group of people, agricultural producers, irrigation providers, and then the soil conservation districts, soil water conservation districts, who can kind of seek these funds for landowners, ranchers, watershed groups, nonprofits, etc. So some examples of what these can be put towards, again, a little bit smaller reach than the 319 funds, but agricultural-based BMPs relating to agricultural practices on your land. They can be put towards hydrologic habitat modifications on your land, and in some cases, even groundwater protection in areas where groundwater has been identified as an issue. BMPs that are relating to those agricultural practices affecting groundwater, this money can also be put towards that. One thing I want to say about this specific funding that's unlike the 319 is that this is ideal for ready to implement projects or projects that are just on the cusp of being ready to go. And I'll kind of show you why that is. So just to go over the process of these two funds, there's some similarities, but there's also some differences to know about. So the federal 319 grant funds are open, applications open annually on April 15th, and that's pretty consistent. And then it consistently also closes on July 15th. This is a 3-year implementation timeline for these funds. So it gives you a little bit more time to get your project up and running. Whereas the state ag funds, those applications open March 14th of this year, and they close April 14th. And these are not as consistent, these dates aren't as consistent, so that can kind of fluctuate. So just, if you're looking at these annually, just keep an eye on our website because we usually provide those dates ahead of time. So as I mentioned before, this is these funds are better for ready to go projects. And the reason is because this is an 18-month implementation timeline. So that's 18 months from the time that the money's awarded to the time that the project needs to be complete. So it's a much faster timeline. The reason being is the state is implementing these funds because they want to see these projects on the ground and being completed. So, but some areas where these two overlap, which is convenient for you or any applicant, is that for both of these, the process is pretty much the same. So you'll identify projects, plan projects, and then the application project budget will get submitted to DEQ through the same process. The projects will be reviewed and ranked by DEQ as well as a basin advisory group. And those will be kind of ranked at the same time. And then if you're chosen or your project is chosen, then it'll be funded the following year. So it's the same process for both. The things to just keep in mind are those different application dates, deadlines, and also the timeline for implementation of these projects is very different. So keep that in mind. And when looking at these types of projects, it's good to, if you're, as far as getting ranked higher, if you can target TMDL objectives within these projects and provide, really detailed work plans and budgets, those go a long way for DEQ and the BAG when looking at projects and ranking them. And in the little salmon, anything that's related to temperature, phosphorus, E. coli, and reducing those types of pollutants, those types of projects are going to be weighed a lot heavier in your area. So, and then some grant details about both federal and state. And this is a very, very small sliver. And so again, please contact me if you want to talk more about this. But for both grants, the funds awarded cannot exceed $250,000. They both require a 40% match minimum. And then the administrative budget for this, for the funds cannot exceed 10% of the grant awarded. So there's a lot more to this, and there's a bit of this information on our website. And so I would encourage you guys to definitely view or visit our website and look into this a little bit more. And then if you do have questions or you even just want to chat about it a little bit more, feel free to do that as well. And I'm going to give you my contact information on this. One more thing I did want to mention, this is another source of funding that might be of interest to you, and it's not implemented through DEQ, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but the Idaho Soil Water Conservation Commission has their water quality program for agriculture fund up and running again. These funds go to water and soil conservation projects, water delivery and drainage rehabilitation improvement projects. It can also go to implementation of agricultural BMPs. So this is another opportunity. I think this funding has some flexibility as well to be used with 319 and also state ag grant funding. So that's another source of funding to look for. And again, you'll probably find most information on that from Idaho's Soil Water Conservation Commission. So one more time, I went through this really fast. but please call me, or send me an email if you want to discuss anything further, if you want clarifications on anything. I'm also really happy to come up there and visit any project sites. If you have projects in mind, I'm happy to come up, walk around with you, talk about, what I see from my perspective, and also listen to what you guys see from your perspective. I'm happy to help before the applications are even submitted on trying to get some of the details and project designs locked up. So please feel free to reach out to me in the Boise Regional Office. There may be, if you're outside Adams County and you're over in the Lewiston area, there will be a separate contact for you over there, which I should have put in here, but I can get you that information afterwards as well. So just before I move on now to kind of my second presentation, does anyone have any questions about this, the non-point source funding?
I have a question. My name is Dean Dryden. I have BMPs and I've done all of that through NRCS, and
Yeah.
some of the things you're talking about have been done under NRCS programs up in Meadows Valley. Very familiar with a lot of the terminology. So are you guys working through with NRCS, or is this independent through you?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and it's a good way to point out too, I think, the amount of funding available. So we don't work, we work with NRCS, but the funding that you're describing through NRCS is separate from this funding. So there's a lot of different pots of funding that are kind of spread out through different agencies. As I mentioned, the Water Quality Program for Agriculture through Idaho Soil Water Conservation Commission is another pot. So the federal 319 funds and then the state agriculture BMP funds, those two funding sources are implemented through Idaho Department of Environmental Quality exclusively. And then any funding through NRCS or Soil Water Conservation Commission, though they can still be federal and state funding, they come from oftentimes different programs. And so they may have different requirements, different places to apply, things like that. So that's good to know. Yeah, we operate these two grant opportunities exclusively through Department of Environmental Quality.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chase, I was going to ask you on the cost share, does it have to be, 40%, it's kind of steep, and not that's, but that's just the terms you guys have, but can you use time and material and like what, how does that cost share work?
Yeah, so there's a lot of in-kind cost sharing that's available now, and that kind of gets into the details a bit more because if it varies based on what type of funding you're going for. But yeah, short answer is yes. There's a lot of things that can be put into that cost share. That time, anything that is in kind to the applicant, things like that. So the 40% seems like you kind of put it, it seems steep, but there's a lot of ways to get into that, including some opportunities for using other grant opportunities to kind of help match. So there are ways to do it, and we're here to help you guys figure that out. We're pretty good at helping people help figure this stuff out every year with their projects, and Boise region is a lot of times gets really good projects on the ground. So those types of questions, if they come up along the process, we're here to help you out with them and make sure that 40% gets hit, and make sure everything's accounted for. So
I've got another question. Sorry.
Sorry.
Again, have you guys got a projection on the cost per foot or like a 4-wire fence?
The cost, I don't have any estimates on like costs of materials or anything like that.
I can tell you what it is.
Okay.
It's a minimum of $4 a foot, and probably depending on terrain and everything, can go up to $8 a foot. So we're talking $20,000 to over $40,000 a mile.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So,
Yeah. Well, and in a lot of cases, we're just completing a fencing project over off Cascade Reservoir, and that's through the Valley County Soil Water Conservation District. And in that case, a lot of people came together on that project, and a lot of support came from different agencies, different parts of the community, providing materials at a lower cost, or donating materials, donating time. They had a lot of people out there, volunteers, who were putting up the fencing. So that was, in-kind match cost. So I know looking at it, beforehand it's a tall order in a lot of cases. But there's a lot of people implementing this money on the ground, all over the Boise region and all over the state. And for me, I think a lot of the money is getting implemented in the same places. And so I personally would like to see some of this money going to areas that are not utilizing it. So, I encourage you guys, if you have questions, or if you want to talk to me about costs and things like that, please do reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help and chat with you about it. So, and then if there's not any other questions on this for now, again, hopefully you have my information down. Please reach out to me. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to my second presentation.
Actually, while you're pointing that out, Wendy, thanks for pointing that out. Wendy Green posted in the chat that the Joe Peterson with the Idaho Soil and Water Conservation Commission will be talking about the water quality program for agriculture at the April meeting of the Adams Soil and Water Conservation District meeting, April 13th at 6 p.m. We are all welcome to attend if anybody would like more information on that program.
That was on the grant that Chase just mentioned?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the Idaho Soil Water Conservation Commission grant, and Joe Peterson is outstanding person. So I highly encourage you guys to go listen to him chat about that.
So is that where you go for the grant money, or do you go to you?
For that, this is why it gets confusing. For that one, you'll want to focus on Idaho Soil Water Conservation Commission. The only two that we implement are the federal 319 and the Idaho Agricultural BMP's grant. That one was the water quality program for agriculture, if that doesn't make it more confusing for you.
So Chase, I'm trying to make sure I got this right. So we got the federal 319 grant and then the Idaho BMP grant, and both of those go through DEQ.
Those both go under DEQ.
Okay, and then there's the water quality program, and that's through the Soil Water Conservation District.
Yeah, Conservation Commission, but yes, they'll kind of work through the districts. Okay.
This is Chris Clark. Before I get started, Chase, I just want to put a plug in for those 319 grants. When I was with the Idaho Department of Lands and the Cascade Reservoir TMDL, we implemented a lot of projects with those 319 grant monies, working with some private landowners on crossings and graveling crossings and things of that nature. And it was really, really easy to work with you. I mean, we submitted, a map. This is the areas we're going to rock. This is the type of rock we're going to apply. Real simple cost estimates, and it got approved, and we, got the work done and took pictures and said, thanks for the money and looks great, so everybody was happy. It was a really win-win and really easy to work with. Just I thought I'd put that plug in there for us.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. We certainly try to make it as easy as we can on you. And, part of the reason I enjoy this part of my job so much is because it does allow me to get out on the land with you guys and look at projects you're interested in. And, I'm mostly there to help you in the beginning, and then, I kind of follow through till the end. And even afterwards, I like to come out and see how things are doing after, even years after the projects are complete. So I appreciate that plug. And I think there's a lot of landowners who have felt the same way that you do about the program. So yeah, I encourage people to reach out to me if you have questions. Okay, I'm going to move on to the Community Science Network. So this is a completely separate presentation, but something that's kind of come up in the Little Salmon River area just recently, really. And I think somebody was asking questions to Emily earlier about community science. I think that might have been Wendy. So I had to keep my, bite my tongue a little bit when that was going on, but hopefully I've got some more answers for you during this presentation. All right, so this is Idaho's Community Science Network. This is something that it's a program I'm leading. It's unfunded. It's really just getting started. It's a statewide program, so hopefully implemented throughout every region in the state. And so, yeah, I just want to kind of chat a little bit with you guys about it. So currently in the state of Idaho, especially at IDEQ, we have active community scientists groups across the state. Data is being collected every summer, every fall, every spring, but we just don't have a mechanism right now to use that data for our federal reporting. So Emily talked a lot about how outside data is accepted and then reported in federal reporting. And I'm going to go over the tiering system just a little bit that we talked about. So we do tier our data when it comes in, and we've got 3 tiers, and essentially tiers 1 and 2 can be used for assessments. So they can be used for decisions made in the state, decisions made in federal reporting. There's another one, tier level 3, which is just kind of identified as a much less rigorous style of data. A lot of times it can be qualitative instead of quantitative. It can be observations, photos, things like that. And this is kind of where community science data sits right now in the state. And it's not at the fault of the community scientists collecting the data. In my belief, the fault is in IDEQ's system and how we provide support to community scientists in training them and letting them know exactly what we're looking for. So my goal with this network is that we can hopefully over time start receiving tier 1 data from community scientists that can be used for these state level decisions and federal level decisions. So there's just kind of some fun numbers that we don't need to spend too much time on, but essentially what these are telling us is this is just like a survey that was taken early on that's basically telling us that we are already, the regions are already using community science data without any sort of infrastructure or guidance from the state on how to do this. So in most cases, like I said, it's being used as tier 3 data, but it is being used, which I think is an important thing to look at. Other thing I learned from this is that when talking with folks at IDEQ, most people believe that our community science data could be used better, or that the network for using it really doesn't exist at all. And so this just kind of gives us an idea of what we're lacking here as an agency, and some of the gaps that need to be filled. And for the most part, a lot of people were saying that if there was an active network, they would use it. A little bit of skepticism still, but that comes from a history of community science at IDEQ kind of failing. So hopefully we can kind of tackle that issue. So just Some of the values of community science, as many of you may know, for us, it helps us fill data gaps and needs. There's very few of us working in our regions, and our regions are very large. So it also allows us to cover more areas for less travel costs, less manpower, things like that. It also gives us an opportunity to be transparent and interact with the public. For us working at DEQ, a lot of us have very similar interests and very similar expectations for Idaho. And so, we want to interact with public on those, and we want to share those beliefs. And this kind of allows us to do that a little bit better. Some of the values that I see for community science in the community itself, in a lot of cases, it gives people hands-on experience in the environment, and a lot of people are looking for that, especially in the state of Idaho, if they're not doing it already. It's also a good way to educate and provide knowledge on the environment around us. I think that goes both ways. We have a lot that we can learn from the public on the environments that they live in, and we also have a lot to offer to the public about the environment. So, and then again, just that transparency. We're looking to try to build more trust in this agency and the science that we do, and kind of showing people that it's not that scary, and a lot of these things that we're finding are things that you guys can see yourselves, in your own environment. So that's kind of what we're looking to do with this community science network. Developing this ComSci network has been tricky. Like I said, it's in the very early stages, but we've got a committee put together within the agency that's got most representation from, or I should say representation from most regions in the state. I think some of them are actually in this. David McIntyre is in this today from Lewiston. He's part of this committee. So we're all working together to try to figure out how to do this the best way for the state of Idaho, and more specifically for our regional offices, because the state, people in this state vary greatly throughout, and so we're trying to figure out how to implement this across the state and represent everybody equally. So the basic concept of this is that our state headquarter office in Boise, which is across the parking lot from the regional office I work in, they kind of are the main headquarters for this network. They reach out to the regional offices, and the regional offices would essentially be working closely with these community science groups. The reason we have community science groups kind of in this is because when you have individuals who are reporting directly to the regional offices, it can get very overwhelming. If you may have 20, 30, 100 individuals reporting data. And so with this network, the way it works, it kind of makes things a little bit cleaner and simpler as far as reporting back to the regional offices. So people would work through community science groups. For example, the Little Salmon River collaboration could be a community science group, and anyone interested in community science participating would kind of function through that group, and that data would get reported back to the Boise regional office or Lewiston regional office through that group. So hopefully that hierarchy kind of makes sense. And again, this is kind of an untested hierarchy, so it could change, but that's what we're working with right now. So real quick, again, state office role would be website support, outreach, education support, some guidance on how the data is going to be used and how we would tier community science data, data management support, and then funding in the future, hopefully. And then the regional offices would build relationships with these community science groups. They would volunteer for their time for training, as well as audits to kind of make sure that quality assurance and control is met up with. And then also kind of helping with project selection and design. So, and then finally, so our initial focus, or our major focus right now, our major concerns are looking for short and long-term funding opportunities. We don't have any funding for this program at all right now. we have permission to kind of seek, building this program, this network, but at this point, we don't have a lot of funding for it. Data storage and management, we don't have a current system set up for this, but we do have a new data storage and management system that we're using, which I believe can handle the community science data. So just kind of figuring out the details on how we're gonna work with the data that's coming in. And then also looking for tiering guidance from our state office and in some cases from federal government and other states who are currently using community science data. So overall, the purpose of the network, what we want to do is we want to provide the regional offices with tools they need to create withstanding relationships with community scientists. We want to fill data gaps and data needs that we have in our regions. We want to bridge the communication and trust between the government and the public. We want to provide short, long-term funding to the community science projects in the future. Hopefully we can provide both of those things, and that would include things like more comprehensive training. It could include things like temperature loggers. Those were discussed earlier, where we might have a project where folks can have consistent temperature loggers collecting data for us. So the funding would go to those types of projects. And also unite community science with agencies and stakeholders across the state. Some of you, have been involved with whether it's MOSS down in McCall or H2O program. These are the types of stakeholders that we want to seek to partner up, for this network and kind of all work together to get people out and collecting data. So that kind of leads me to this concept that we're kind of just starting to discuss, and it's a Little Salmon, community science monitoring pilot project. This could be a great location if there's interest up there. It could be a great location to kind of put some of this stuff on the ground and test it out. We'd be looking for your guys' feedback on what types of resources you need, feedback on what types of training and structure work for you, and also, helping a little bit, getting an idea of project implementation and organization as well. So this is something we'll continue to discuss, and hopefully we can, with our limited funds and whatnot, it'd probably be Boise Regional Office and the Lewiston Regional Office would kind of team up and kind of hopefully get this pilot project on the ground and moving. So same information as before, but just in case you needed it again, is my contact information. And yeah, this is a really new and early stage for us in this network, but a lot of states are doing this, and I personally think it's time Idaho does the same, and so hopefully we can get something built up for you guys. So yeah, if anyone has any questions about this, I don't know how much time I have left, but you're welcome to ask me now. Also, again, feel free to reach out to me.
So community science, are you encouraging people to go into private property and take pictures or whatever? I mean, this sounds real Big Brother.
No, I mean, some of the benefits to community science is that, there's that word in there that's community. And in a lot of cases, some of the information we're looking for, as Emily mentioned, we don't go into private property without permission. There's a lot of things we don't do as a state agency. And so by relying on the community to kind of, a lot of times you guys know each other, you guys interact with each other and communicate. That's kind of the network that we're trying to create, is utilizing the people who live in these communities and know the people in these communities, utilizing them to help us, get some information that either is unobtainable by us or just information that they're interested in finding out themselves. So, but no, we're not encouraging people to trespass or anything like that. And that would probably get covered in a lot of the resources that would be kind of given to community scientists through the network.
Chase, this is Dean Dryden again. I'm very uncomfortable with this, and mostly because data that's collected by biased people is biased data. And I really don't want to be looking over my shoulder with somebody taking pictures of me all the time. And while I'm doing my work, and I am not in favor of this at all. This is just Big Brother.
Yeah, I don't know what you're thinking here, but how much private property do you own and how much money do you make off of our natural resources on private property? I mean, that's kind of what you're asking here. This is very unbelievable, actually, that
Yeah.
anybody would do this in Idaho.
Hey, Chase, I had a question. What was the example you said?
Which one?
I thought you said there was some other place that had done this, and I was just, what's the
Oh.
frame?
Oh, yeah, I mean, community science, citizen science is, it's pretty well practiced through a lot of states. Washington, Oregon, Utah, Nevada, California, Montana has a fantastic community science program. Wyoming's got a program. The community science programs are not set up to regulate or anything like that. That's not the purpose of them. And so, if I gave that impression, I apologize. But basically, what these programs are set up to do is to get people involved in the community, involved in essentially monitoring the water in their, in the area that they live. And by doing that, they're not seeing government employees out there collecting data and never seeing what that data looks like or what it says and what it means. It's essentially allowing them to collect the data themselves and explore the data themselves and come up with their own conclusions and work closely with myself and other regional employees on what that data means and how it can be used. So I mean, it's being used in a lot of different states. I'd be happy to send you guys some information on what other states are doing and what their programs look like. And as I mentioned, it's happening in Idaho already, and it has been for a long time. It's something as simple as folks having a temperature or a thermometer on their dock on a lake or reservoir and checking the temperature of the reservoir every day, every morning when they wake up, looking at the temperature and writing it down and reporting it back to us. It's just another way for us to, see how things are doing when we can't be everywhere all the time. So
I've got a question. This is Aaron Humphreys.
Mhm.
With relation to data security, what is where is the ownership and what is the chain of custody of that data? Is it owned by the individual who collected it, or is it upon submission that it is now shared data and the individual no longer has ownership of it? And what securities are even implemented with that data once it's collected?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, the data would be, it would be owned by whoever collected it. And then, if they're working through through their community science group, essentially that group would have ownership of that data until, chain of custody, when they submit, if they decide to submit it to the Department of Environmental Quality, then that data would essentially become public data, because all data that is collected by the Department of Environmental Quality or any state agency is open to the public. So, essentially the way that would work is if the data was collected until it was reported to us, it would remain within the group that collected it. And once it was reported to DEQ, it would become public data, that anyone would be able to access or anyone would be able to request information on that data. And a lot of the reasons we haven't been using it so far is because of the quality assurance and the quality controls that we kind of expect on community science collected data. And so a lot of those things will be implemented through this network where we would have certain things in place where You know, the quality of the data would be looked at pretty rigorously. And that would include things like, you know, where was it collected, who collected it, how did they collect it, have they been trained, you know, things like that. And so there's a lot of things that, you know, would have to get checked off the list before this data would even become usable data for us. But yeah, hopefully that answers that question for you.
For the most part, yeah.
I can tell you that, that, you know, you say it's public record. When I did watershed projects in this valley 15 years ago, all of a sudden my name and how much money the NRCS gave me was put on a website, and their point of view was that I was wasting government money, and this was an environmental website, and that I was taking money from the government. And I really have a hard time with this. It's can be abused terribly.
It
So
will
I'm seeing a real wide open abuse problem that could be done here. And I'll be honest with you, it makes a property owner or a rancher or a farmer very jaded. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I will. I appreciate the feedback on it. Yeah, you know, unfortunately, a lot of things that are run through the state, all things that are run through the state are supposed to be transparent and public information. So it unfortunately opens the door to you know, certain groups as far as abusing that information. But in some cases too, you know, I would hope that, you know, some of the good things that come out of these types of programs would ultimately outshine those types of things. But I understand the direct effect on you, and so I hear you on that.
This is Aaron again. In lieu of that last sentiment, what kind of incentives are you even offering in this to get over that downside? I don't see much interest in this at all for just the local people, and it just seems like a giant problem.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no incentive offered by the state for these types of programs. The program itself is voluntary, is completely voluntary. So, you know, a lot of times these groups that are interested in participating in these types of programs, it can be as many as, you know, 20 people. It can be 1 or 2 people. It really just depends on who has the interest in it and who has the time. And like I said, you know, what it looks like, it can vary greatly. It can be, you know, a well-organized group who, you know, has certain projects in mind. It could be somebody who's just simply looking at temperature off their boat dock every morning. So there's not really like, you know, I guess the traditional sense of an incentive provided. It's really up to the community themselves whether or not they want to be a part of it. But obviously there's no pressure or, you know, mandate or anything like that from the government to participate in these types of programs. So
This is Dean Ryan again. One
Sorry, can this be the last
point.
one?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can this be the last one just because of time?
Oh, because time.
But we can reach out to them.
I'm a little concerned about this, that there could be basically padded data by spatial interest groups that are gathered. So I want you to think about that.
I
yeah,
heard they're trying to help, supposedly.
yeah, no, and I have thought about that, and I hear exactly what you're saying. You know, ideally right now, you know, unfortunately the idea of padded data exists right now because some of these groups that you were talking about do have the funding to collect data, and they do have the personnel to collect data, and they oftentimes do submit it to DEQ, and it in a lot of cases is graded as tier 2 data. And so, you know, some of these things that you're concerned about, I absolutely hear you on them. And this program is actually kind of designed to kind of direct us away from that, because what it does is it takes people in the community who have an interest in their community, and it allows them to kind of take ownership of collecting that data themselves, as opposed to relying on either government agencies or relying on these, you know, nonprofit funded organizations who have the funding and the personnel to do that. So, you know, ideally these community science programs or these groups are made up of people who live in the community and have, you know, a shared interest in that community. So, and then there would be a lot of essentially quality checks, things that DEQ would look at that are not in place currently. There would be a lot of those types of things that would be put into place so that we know that the data that we're getting is not skewed and is essentially true data. So that's kind of the overall goal of this type of program. And it, you know, maybe it's something there is interest in this area, and maybe it's something that's not of interest to the area. That's fine either way. Yeah, I mostly am just, you know, presenting this concept because I've had interest expressed to me from the area to have a program like this. So, but if you guys have more questions or you want to chat about this a little further, again, please feel free to contact me because it sounds like we're out of time. So.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks,
Thank
Chase.
you guys.